this, in my opinion, is started to create a crisis inside the venture capital business model, because there is no such kind of products on the market, the right products to invest. And speaking with a lot of venture capital, they are recognizing, this problem. And another layer, of this complexity is that especially talented people, now they want to create their startup. And then there is tons of people that is pitching, that is sending documentation and so on. And now finding the needle in the haystack is become very, 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 very difficult.
In this thought-provoking episode of Engines of Creation, we sit down with Andrea Ridi, CEO of ScaleUp Labs, an accomplished entrepreneur and venture capitalist, to explore the intricate world of startup creation and venture capital. With a background in physics and a wealth of experience in building successful startups, Andrea shares his unique perspective on the challenges and complexities of the venture capital landscape. We deep dive into the venture capital model, discussing its inherent flaws and the unrealistic expectations placed on startups. Andrea highlights the difficulties in finding the right talent and the overvaluation of companies, which often leads to underperformance in the industry. He emphasizes the need for a paradigm shift in how venture capitalists approach their investments, advocating for a more active role in nurturing startups from inception to growth. The conversation also touches on the concept of catalytic combinations, where existing technologies are synergistically combined to create innovative solutions. Andrea argues that by leveraging these combinations and fostering strong relationships with the ecosystem, venture studios can significantly reduce risk and complexity while increasing the chances of success for new startups. As we explore the impact of generative AI on the venture capital market, Andrea provides insights into how this technology can empower rather than replace human talent. He discusses the potential of generative AI to simplify complexity and enhance decision-making processes within organizations. Join us for this engaging discussion that challenges conventional views on venture capital and startup creation, offering valuable insights into the future of innovation in a complex world. So, let's go! Welcome, Andrea. I'm really happy to have you here today. Really excited. Know it's going to be an interesting conversation and also a bit different from the usual ones. And in particular, I think it's going to be interesting for us to resume our topic around investments. That's something that we started some time ago in the podcast, and you are the perfect guest for that. So for the ones who don't know you yet, Andrea, can you spend a few words introducing yourself, please?
Yep, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you, Christian. And I started my career like a researcher in physics, then very hard skill. Then after a few years in academia, I decided to exit, and I started to create a high-tech startup. Especially the first experiment was made in Italy. But around 2010, I started to understand that if you want to be successful, you needed to migrate abroad. And then with one of my startup, I decided to make the go-to-market from Boston. Then I move my family, my children, my dogs here in Boston, and I start my go-to-market strategy. And the adventure was pretty good. And in 2020, I decided to exit from my company and start a new career. I decided to stay here in this ecosystem because it's a really fantastic ecosystem with a lot of opportunity. I started to collaborate with a lot of local venture capital. And here I make some experience what means to be on the other side of the table. But after a while, I discovered that, it's interesting, but it's not my sweet spot. My real passion and sweet spot is creating company from scratch, from -10 to 0. And then with a group of other serial entrepreneurs, we create a venture studio. And now we are managing and launching this venture studio. In my spare time, I'm also a part-time professor in HALT International Business School. And I try to help especially the Italian ecosystem with the concept of give back.
I would like to go a little bit more in details, especially around venture capitalist and venture capitalism. Let's say you definitely experience from both sides, both as a, let's say, idea pitcher, and then going on the other side from the perspective of being the venture capitalist. And I understand now we are sort of moving back to that role, but with a twist, as far as I understand, into a new experience that I'm sure we will be able to talk more about that. But I'm really curious to understand your view around the venture capitalist approach and venture capitalism. Is it a model that works? I understand from previous conversations and also reading some of your articles that it's not something you think there are things that can be improved. I know you're not the only one thinking that. And so I really like to understand your take on sort of the VC model and what's wrong. And if there is anything wrong, of course, but I believe you think there is, and what we can improve in that.
When you start to pitch your idea to the venture capital, you don't really understand what is the business model of a venture capital. You are really concerned about finding the money, finding the resource in order to go ahead with your startup. But in a moment that you are going on the other side of the table, you start to see a complete different level of complexity. Okay, first of all, I'm speaking in particular about the US venture capital. Okay, and because the US venture capital is different from other venture capital. In other ecosystem, there is a lot of public money to help and so on. I'm speaking only about, let's say, private money investment. And a venture capital, first of all, is not investing his own money. A venture capital, okay, is managing third-party money. And in order to manage this third-party money, okay, they need to make a promise of a big return, a return that is bigger than the standard market return. And because they are investing in a very high-risk company, okay, if you do some math, the company that are successful for a venture capital are companies that are able to improve their corporate value by factor of 100 in few years. Okay, then especially for early stage VC, okay, they need to invest their money in companies that have the possibility to grow 100 times in few years. Now, because you are speaking about early stage company, you are betting on a team of people. And now you are looking for a kind of a superhero because you need to find people that are able to creating something from scratch. That is very difficult. When they create something from scratch, they have the ability to put on the market. That is, again, difficult. And then when they are successful on the market, they need to have all the managerial skill in order to grow. And then they need all the financial skill in order to manage a complex company that is growing very fast. Okay. And on the market, especially because now the market is very complex, okay, there is no such of this skill. Are very, very few the people that are able to manage, okay, such scenario. Because there is more people that are more specialized in creation, in growing, and so on. But in the venture capital business model, they need to find this kind of superhero. And this is increasing the risk of failure. And for this reason, that a lot of venture capital is underperforming. And for the same reason, the very few companies that have all these right ingredients, they started to have an overvaluation. And because they have an overvaluation, now they are not able to maintain their promise. And also, let's say, if they have all the right ingredients, now they are going to fail. And this, in my opinion, is started to create a crisis inside the venture capital business model. Because there is no such kind of products on the market, the right products to invest. And speaking with a lot of venture capital, they are recognizing, this problem. And and another layer, of this complexity is that especially talented people now they want to create their startup, and then there is tons of people that is pitching, that is sending documentation and so on. And now finding the needle in the haystack is become very, 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 very difficult.
Okay, so let me try to understand. So we have a situation where we have wrong expectations on what a startup can do. We have a situation where it's very difficult to find the right talent. And I think also there is a situation where we have too much offer, in a sense, a lot of people that are actually pitching. I understand there are these three ingredients. You mentioned one thing, something about the fact that there is a wrong product, or at least they cannot find the right product. Can you dive down a little bit more into that specific one?
Yeah, okay. If you are looking the market with the eyes of a venture capital, startup are the products. Now, you need a process in order to enter in such a market and find the right products to buy. It's like to enter on Amazon and you start to have tons of products and every product look great. Now, what are the real dimensions in order to understand if the products is the product compliant with your investment thesis? How you are understanding if is the product that can give the return of your investment? And because, and especially with the generative AI, now the situation become worse and worse. Everyone is able to write a decent pitch. Before generative AI, having a decent pitch was still a green flag. And now all the red flags are reduced and you don't have a real, let's say, way to find the right products. And the only way that I'm seeing that is working is the personal connection. I'm investing in Christian because I know you from 10 years and I know that you have all the skill. But again, maintaining all this relationship is not possible. You can maintain 100 quality relationship, not more. And again, you are overwhelmed by complexity. The system start to become chaotic at the end of the day. And in a chaotic system, to make a decision is like flipping a coin. But if you are flipping a coin, the business model of venture capital is not returning the investment because you need to beat the probability. But in this moment, you don't have an instrument in order to overperform respect to probability.
I appreciate a lot your connection with complexity, which, as you know, is the main topic of this podcast. That's really hard for a VC to understand what's the best product. And you mentioned the needle in the haystack. Now, the other topic you mentioned, which is something I would like to dive down a little bit more, is building a startup is really hard. It's not something that it's easy to do. You need to identify the right team and so forth. And that's also something interesting, since as many, of course, not everyone, but many people that got involved into VC, you were a startupper first and you did many times and you're doing it again right now. So can you elaborate more, going back from the point of view of, again, of a startupper, what are the right ingredients to build the right startup and what are the complexities there?
First of all, I'm teaching how to create a startup. And the first question that all my students is asking me, okay, is what is the right recipe to create a startup? And my answer is pretty delusional. I don't think that there is a right way to create a startup. There is a lot of wrong way to create a startup. And again, and this is dealing with complexity. In a complex system, there is no a right way, but there is some very specific wrong way to manage complexity. And the first problem with a startup is finding other people that is investing in you. This is the first problem. A lot of people is creating a startup with other people for the wrong reason, because they are friends, because they was a classmate, because they met in, a symposium. But there is no this concept that your co-founder are the first investor in your company. And you need to find the right co-founder, okay? Because this is the first value of the startup. When you have the right people, the second step is finding the right idea. Okay, you can have tons of idea. First of all, there is no value in an idea. The only value is in the execution. Now, the team of people that you are selected are able to execute the idea? Probably no. And now you need to find other people and other resources in order to execute. And in the moment that you started to have a product, a value proposition, a market fit, now start the problem. Because you had an incredible team that was able to, let's say, start from zero and arrive to a market fit with probably a prototype, some marketing and sales activity. But now you have to change. All the skill that was important in order to reach this point are not anymore important. Your head of products is able now to manage 20 people. Alone was great, but now you are asking him to become a manager. The sales guys that was able to accomplish the first sales in his network now is able to create an international organization in order to sell. You start to see that the skills are completely different. And a lot of time, startup is failing in this phase because you needed to change the hero. At the beginning, the hero are the technical people, the people that is creating the technology that is, let's say, start from an idea, they creating something real. Now you need a completely different hero, people that is selling, people that is making marketing. And a lot of companies are not able to make this change. And they are failing, not because the market and so on, but because lack of leadership. And then, in the moment that you start to grow, you need tons of money. And now you need to introduce all the financial concept in your company. And when a financial guy is entering your company, it's like a trauma. Until yesterday, you spoke about technology. You spoke about we have a great value proposition for our customer and so on. And now is arriving a guy that is start to measure. Oh, no, we needed to reduce our service level agreement because in this way we can improve our ROI of 2%. Are you kidding me? Again, it's another transformation. And you see, all these change are a real problem to grow. Are, again, all the problem that you have to address for a successful startup. And again, I think that we need to be agree on one concept. What is a startup? What is the difference between a startup and small medium enterprise? In my jargon, a startup is a company that is able to grow very fast in the future. A small and medium company is a good company, but is not able to grow so fast. And in the moment that you are not able to make this change, if you are lucky, you are becoming a small medium company. that is not bad. Okay, but with the investor point of view, is a nightmare, because now you have a product in your portfolio that is not dying, but is not. There is no way to have the money back. It's better to kill.
I understand. That's very interesting, and of course you can somehow return off the investment at least partially. You have assets and licenses and customers, but that's really fascinating. You touch so many points, and of course, having a definition of a startup in this way, it can be very clarifying, because yes, sometimes I can say even myself, I can get confused, or I can see a lot of small, medium companies which call themselves startups for a lot of disparate reasons that might make more sense or not. And you raise a valid point around the opportunity to grow. The other things that are definitely resonated with me is the transition, I would say, from the ideation phase and the scaling phase, which requires different kind of people and which requires different kind of approaches. And at least in my experience and as a startup advisors in the past or in sort of M&A activities, has been always that the scaling, also as a technology person, the scaling is very, very important. Also, just on the technology front, even if you look from the perspective of all the other components that start becoming important, operations, finance, and what I mean with that, I was actually last week doing a lecture at the Barcelona Technology School, and I got a question which was really about these sort of things, and I stressed the fact that it's always very important that you have the right solution, the right architecture, and the right organization for the right size. So I've seen startups that were investing in over-engineered architectures and literally sank the startup because it didn't make any sense at that point to have such a fancy technology. Just needed something to chuck out and test with the customer and see what was working. And on the other end, startup that got sunk because basically the architecture was just a hack, and nobody invested in the tech to sort of invested into repaying the technical debt. And then when it was a moment of scaling, literally they couldn't serve the customer. And again, they lost the opportunity to scale. So, and that just, if you stay only in the technology area and not just touching all the other elements. So sometimes exactly even there are, and I talk to people that are good, let's say CTOs for the first iteration, and there are good CTOs for scaling, and they're not necessarily the same expertise and the right people and so forth. And that applies everywhere. And it's a super important concept. So we are in this space where you came to us, giving us a story that to me makes sense and it kind of resonates. And I heard also from others in the industry, the VC model has problems. Someone says is broken. You can clearly see that also looking at the investments in the sector, which are sort of going down definitely over 2024. There are a lot of course, how can I say, macroeconomic reasons. But that's the point. Sometimes when everything is fine, money flow, nobody cares. And then when actually times get harder, it's really, you see the models that works and the model that don't. And we saw that. I'm just making an example on crypto. Personally, I do believe crypto makes sense. But definitely when we had the sort of the first dip, it kind of made a good filter of what made sense versus what was just basically a scam. So what's the recipe then? You mentioned complexity many times, which of course I love. And I understand that, of course, this is a very complex model because you have so many parameters. And if you're venture capital also, there is an element of numbers where you can anyway think of returning if you are betting on 100 time valuation, you're basically betting on large numbers. That's what you're doing. Actually, you're betting on outliers. That's what you're really doing. Usually everyone works, let's say, on standard normal distributions, I would say, and play around that. Here we are the other way around. You're really looking at the edge of your distribution. And that's a completely different approach, definitely away from any, how can I say, standard finance and economic approach. And you're literally betting on making sure, okay, if I have my net wide enough, I'm going to catch some outliers, and these outliers are going to repay for all the other investments. So said that, what's the recipe then that you suggest?
This is my vision and my opinion. We needed to embrace more complexity. At the end of the day, the venture capital model is a passive model. They are putting the resource and they are in some way wait for the result. If we go a step further, why we have to be passive? We can start to use the money to create the right startup, okay, and start to make some engineering around the startup. For example, we hire people in order to make the first phase from -10 to 0. When they achieve the goal of arriving to 0, we take these guys and we put on another project. And now we have other guys that are more, let's say, able to go from 0 to 10. And when they arrive to 10, again, we put this team on another project and we enter with the team focused on from 10 to 1,000. This is a way to manage, okay, for example, the complexity around the team. About the technology, you touch an super important point. There is startup that they have incredible technology able to serve billions of users, but they don't have a user. They invest a lot of money for nothing. Or on the other hand, there are startups that are, let's say, they have a technology hammered, but they are not able to scale. If there is an organization behind with all the right experience and tools, can give to the startup the right tools for the right stage. And again, instead of reinventing the wheels, because every startup at the end of the day need to reinvent the wheels, you can start to apply some blueprint. And now you are reducing the risk. On commercial side, okay, because this organization, we call this a venture studio, is maintaining a relationship with a huge ecosystem, now, okay, is also able to find the right ideas for the market. Again, is a way to reduce the complexity and reducing the risk. In this way, you are not looking for the outlier, but you can create your outlier. And this, in my vision, is the next step of the venture capital industry, becoming not only passive, but more active, and start to engineering the process of creating to fulfill all the lifetime of a successful startup from 0 to 1,000.
I'm thinking about what you said is from a passive approach to an active approach. So I understand that to this aim and also what you're working on is to build a new kind of venture studio that should sort of give this opportunity to move from this passive approach to an active one. Another things that we found very interesting, sort of talking to you in the past around this venture studio idea, and it's something you might want to elaborate a little bit more, is what you call the catalytic combinations.
This is starting from a huge experience in interacting with the startup ecosystem. Okay. And I'm finding incredible technology, incredible products everywhere. There is some Latin American company startup that create amazing products, Italian startup that create amazing products, and so on. But at the end of the day, if you have a great product and a great idea in an underserved ecosystem, the probability to find all the resources that you need to become a unicorn, okay, to become an outlier, are very difficult. Okay, creating a good startup is a nightmare, but creating a good startup in an underserved ecosystem is a double nightmare. Then the idea is why in our venture studio we have to reinvent the wheels. We have a connection with the big player, the big company, and so on. We have a clear idea about their unmet need. But instead of recreating from scratch a technology, we can find some pre-existing technology and creating a so-called catalytic combination. In some cases, we need a different technology that we put together, okay, in order to create an offering for some customer. And we find also the right capital and the right people here in US in order to fulfill, okay, this unmet need. In this way, we are making some engineering in order to create a successful startup in a win-win situation. The people that develop the technology, now they have a real opportunity to monetize their investment. The company, now they have a real solution. The ecosystem, the investor, and so on, now they have a good outlier. In this way, okay, again, we are reducing part of the complexity and we are reducing the risk. Instead of creating from scratch the other great idea, we are leveraging on tons of this idea that are around the world. And this is the idea of, let's say, it's like in chemistry. If you have different good ingredients and you are putting together, a lot of time nothing happens. If you are putting some catalyst in the middle, now magic happens. And all these ingredients start to interact each other in order to create a new material, a new formula, a new chemical reaction. And this is the idea behind. And this is another way to manage complexity and to manage the risk and to create a possible outlier.
Of course, I love the name, catalytic combination, since it's kind of very much, of course, grounded in complexity. But it is also a very sound concept. Now, trying to play for a second devil's advocate and going back, I would say, to the beginning and to all the reasons you said around why the VC model doesn't really work. How do you see a concept like the one you described, and I know you're working on around this venture studio? How do you see this concept competing against, let's say, more standard startup accelerators that are out there, which I see somehow they are kind of iterating, as far as I understand, towards a similar direction? And I might be wrong here, but I feel there is a sort of convergence towards creating similar ingredients.
I don't see competition. I don't see competition because the market is huge. For example, in our group, we are running international acceleration program. And when we are scouting for this candidate, we are finding a great team with great ideas and great opportunity. Then we enroll them in our acceleration program. But a lot of time, we are finding, for example, great technology, but with team, for example, that they don't want to relocate in the US, for example. Or a solo founder with an incredible technical skill, but no real managerial skill. Okay, these are the right ingredients for our catalytic combination. And this kind of products is not the right products for an acceleration program. Is not the right products for a venture capital. In some way, we are able to recycle products that are not good enough for all the other players and convert this recycle in gold.
I like that. And I understand here that, again, I'm trying to play it back and see if I get it. What I'm hearing is that the current VC model, and which all its, let's call it ancillary services, including startup accelerators, which are sort of part of the funnel, they kind of got stuck into a standard model. And in this way, they are actually losing a lot of opportunities, not being able to explore the broader opportunities in the market that are usually immediately discarded by the process. And actually, in that sense, is the process being wrong? It's just trying to find a way to close the funnel as much as possible and to get somewhere. Let's say to select some products as fast as possible. And your ideas in that sense is kind of going the other way around. They're thinking, okay, what's the right process to build a startup product in the sense you introduced us earlier? So a company that can serve a market and can scale up quickly. Is that what you're kind of?
Yeah.
Okay, I think I understand. I'm sure the listener could opt way faster than me, but it's always nice to sort of try to play back and see if we are all on the same page. I think it's a marvelous idea. I really like how you are presenting it. And again, we are living in a complex world, which is the headline of this podcast. And definitely venture capitalism is one of the most complex things we can do for all the reasons we explained. Before closing, I would like to go back to another thing you mentioned earlier. You were talking about generative AI, and you mentioned how generative AI is making the life worse for investors because now everyone is able to build a good pitch. And that's an interesting one. But again, personally, I think Gen AI is going to be, and is already, in a way, a great source of further complexity. And it's already shaking a lot of industries. And we will see more of this shaking in the future. And so I'd like to understand a little bit more, what are for you the opportunities and threats of Gen AI in the venture capital market? But I think venture capital market, in a way, it's so broad that it kind of sort of, it can encompass almost anything anyway. And so what are, in more generically, probably the Gen AI opportunities and threat that you see in front of us?
Okay, first of all, Gen AI is pretty new, and let's say the ecosystem is started to understand how to leverage on this technology. It's an incredible, powerful technology, but I have also a lot of limitation. It's a technology. It's not magic. And first of all, in this moment, no one is investing in startup. They are not leveraging on generative AI. Also for internal process, okay. For example, I deal with a manufacturing company, okay, with a great idea, and their value proposition was leveraging on generative AI for internal process. Their final products is a piece of hardware. There is no generative AI, but they are leveraging a lot on generative AI for their operation and so on. Now they are interesting for the venture capital world and so on. Then in this moment is a must-have. If you don't have generative AI inside your company, you are not attractive. And this is good on one hand, but very bad on other hands, because there is a lot of people that is trying to leverage on this technology without understanding what is able to do this technology, and they are creating disaster. They are not understanding what is the relationship between human labor and generative AI. A lot of people is thinking that generative AI can, let's say, substitute humans. I think that is not true. Generative AI can empower humans. Instead of having 10 people in marketing, you can have 2 very smart guys plus generative AI in marketing. But this is not replacing humans. It's empowering humans. If you want to make marketing only with generative AI, okay, will be a disaster. Then this is the real challenge, okay, with this technology. Be able to understand how to use. I have a lot of this conversation, especially in the, let's say, in the university. Okay, a lot of students are using generative AI to make them assignment. They're not producing value. One of my goal is teaching them how to leverage on this technology in order to create to overperforming. In my university, when we are giving an assignment, we also publish an example of assignment made by ChatGPT. And this is the baseline. Now, dear student, you have to overperform. And the same we need to do also with the startup. And I think that this will be a big revolution, but we need some year to understand better how to manage with this new complexity generator. Because at the end of the day, it's lowering a lot of barrier. And because it's lowering a lot of barrier, now there is more noise, more player, more interconnection that are the base of a chaotic system. And again, this technology is pushing our ecosystem towards more chaotic system. And the complexity is, let's say, is improved.
It's really interesting when you mention around the opportunity to empower humans. I was actually thinking about recent interview of NVIDIA CEO. One was sort of mentioning his idea of NVIDIA itself becoming a company with like 20,000 or something human employees as they are now, and a few millions AI employees. And that was the way he was seeing it versus, of course, we're going to get rid of all the humans and we don't need them anymore. I think it's more about augmenting humans. And other things I've heard you saying in the past that I think it's interesting, it's that while, of course, generative AI is going to be, in many ways, a complexity generator. If used properly, it can be used to simplify complexity.
Yeah.
And one thing that really struck my interest was that with generative AI, you can manage at the same time a local and a global view. Can you elaborate a bit more on that?
Is how to use properly this technology. You touch an important point, especially in my vision of the future. Generative AI can help us, can empower us in managing complexity. Imagine if you are the CEO of a big multinational company. At a certain point, the company is so complex that for you it's quite impossible to have an holistic vision. You have the vision of the people that is creating the vision of other people and so on. It's a big funnel. And for this reason that the big company are so slow, not very innovative and so on. Now, leveraging on generative AI, you can start to have an holistic vision. You can start to manage the complexity. You can start to understand better. And you can try to, let's say, reintroduce some startup concept also in pre-existing corporation. But again, if you think that the generative AI will manage your company, you are, in my opinion, you are on the wrong mindset. If you start to think that the generative AI will empower you and your manager in doing better, now you got the point. And for this reason that I start to see that there is a new generation of company that is arising. Okay, are company that are leveraging on generative AI from the beginning. Is a artificial intelligence first company. In this way, you can also, let's say, manage another problem, the lack of talent. Imagine that you have to grow very fast in an ecosystem like the Bostonian one. Okay, here there is no unemployment. Finding resources, you need a lot of money. If you can start to leverage on this technology in order to empower the talent that you have, now you can scale more faster. And in this way, okay, you can use these tools in order to manage, again, the complexity on local level inside your company, but also in interaction with the market, in interaction with all the ecosystem. There is an interesting project that we started to work in here in the Cambridge ecosystem. There is a group of people that we are working together, and in the next future, we will start also to organize some public event about this concept. How we can leverage on generative AI in order to create a startup from zero to be investable in less than 1 month. And without generative AI is completely unachievable. You need at least 1 year. Now there is enough tools, enough technology in order to start to create a new framework in order to achieve this goal. It's very challenging, but we believe that is achievable.
Yeah, I understand why, and I understand the potential there. Of course, it's a very nice project. It shows the right targets. As much as I loved the idea of, as you mentioned earlier, that was more for the university assignments. That's what ChatGPT does. Show us you can do better. I remember discussing with Jose Aptlut at the Personal Technology School general manager at the beginning of all this generative AI, and there was this question, a lot of universities kind of reacting like, you can't use it.
Yeah.
And the point is, if you're a technology university, it's the other way around, is you must use it, and you need to show us what you can do with that. So it's instead of reacting against, which is very much typical sort of old-style university approach, unfortunately, from many universities, not all, it's the other way around, is how can you embrace these things to power up yourself. Thanks a lot. I think we covered a lot of ground, and we started from the VC sector to really the opportunities of generative AI, and was very, very interesting conversation. So to close, asking you the question that I ask all the other guests, and I'm really curious to hear your response. What are for you the characteristics of a leader who embraces complexity?
We joke before about this concept, but in my opinion, a good leader able to embrace complexity is having a good retirement. It means that you was able to manage complexity and create a stable value for the future. And now you can live on the value that you created. Okay. And I think that this is the right mindset. If we are able to manage complexity, is not only a local result. You needed to create value. And because there is this huge opportunity to create a huge value, now you can also work to create value. And when you arrive to a certain stage of your life, you can have this passive value enjoyment that we call retirement. I don't believe that in public funding. Okay, I believe that if you was able to do correctly your job, now you generate enough resources in order to have a deserved retirement.
I love that. And yes, and it is true. Pre-recording, we were joking about that. And I love the fact you actually presented it as the main characteristic. Clearly, I have to answer. It's a moment of self-reflection because I'm definitely doing something wrong because I'm absolutely not at that point yet. But that's good. That's one of the things where you come constantly to challenge yourself. And that sounds a very good challenge. And I think it really lies into really understanding complexity. So it is a very good point. And I think it links very strongly with one of the assumptions I have in my mind that I always wanted to share as a sort of a foundational point of this podcast, which is about the fact that if you embrace complexity in the right way, you create value, you can innovate. And I think that's really what I believe this podcast is about, is what are the conditions to create value and to innovate. And if you bring all the right ingredients together, that's what you can do. And I think today you showed us a lot of interesting elements in your industry on what can be the conditions to create value. And you also gave us a good target, which is then you can reach retirement. I think that's the perfect way to conclude. So thank you very much, Andrea. It was very, very fascinating. And I'm really happy to have this conversation. Thanks for.
Thank you, Christian, for this opportunity. It was a real pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Engines of Creation. I hope you enjoyed diving into the complexities of venture capital and the startup ecosystems with Andrea Ridi. From the challenges of scaling a startup to the transformative power of generative AI, this conversation was packed with insights that every entrepreneur and investor should know. If you enjoyed this episode, you might want to look at other conversations about investments and startups like the one with Bruce Sinclair. And of course, if you want to learn more, make sure to follow Engines of Creation and please leave us a rating and a review. And don't hesitate to share this episode on social media and with friends and colleagues who might be interested. This podcast counts on you to grow and help other people to understand and embrace complexity, to innovate and create. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, feel free to reach out to angelesofcreation@mastrodonato.co. I'll be happy to continue the conversation with you. Angels of Creation will be back soon with a new episode. Stay tuned for more stimulating conversations on complexity, innovation, and leadership.